Somewhere in America right now, there is a 5-gallon bucket sitting in a garage with something brown and quiet inside it. Somebody watched a video. They boiled the potatoes, stirred in the compost, waited the 24 hours the video promised, poured it around their tomatoes, and nothing happened. I have made that bucket more than once, and it took me years to understand that the recipe was not wrong. It was missing one link. One. And a chain missing a single link does not work a little bit less. It does not work at all. Today we build 5 buckets together. 4 of them you have probably already seen. The potato bucket, the plant and manure bucket, the spray for your tomatoes, the watermelon rind bucket. You will see every one again, this time with the missing link. The 5th one you have almost certainly never made. It is free. You already produce it every single day, and it has more real field research behind it than everything else in this video combined. I will hold that until we get there. And along the way, I am handing you 3 free tests. Because what bothers me about garden videos is that they hand you a recipe and walk away, and you are left in the yard with a wet bucket wondering whether any of it did a thing. You are going to know. That is the promise. Let's get our hands dirty. First, meet the man who designed most of what you are about to make. His name got scrambled on the internet, and the real story is better than the scrambled one. In 1991, a young Korean chemist named Youngsang Cho went home to farm. He had a chemistry degree from a Jiao University and a master's in horticultural science, and he came back to Asan, in Cheongcheongnam-do province, to learn from his father. His father was Hankyu Cho, the man who founded Korean natural farming. And then the son did something that takes a certain kind of courage. He looked at his father's system, decided it cost too much, and asked too much of ordinary farmers, and built his own. He called it Jadam. Now, you will find people online who say Jadam stands for joyful agriculture through microorganisms. It does not. The internet invented that. Jadam comes from a Korean phrase, Jeonyul Daman Saramdul, and it means people who resemble nature. Hold on to that, because it tells you the design goal. Not the strongest brew, not the most impressive brew, the one a person with nothing can make out of what is already lying around. Bucket 1, the microbe starter, and the foundation the other 4 stand on. Here is the version most people have seen. Boil potatoes, mash them, stir in a couple cups of compost, add half a cup of brown sugar. Fill a 5-gallon bucket with water, cover it, wait a day, strain, dilute 10-to-1. Almost all of that is right, and whoever wrote it understood the shape of the thing. But there are 4 places where it quietly comes apart, and the first one costs you the most. The recipe says boil the potatoes, then drain the water. Do not drain that water. Think about what you just did. You held starchy potatoes in hot water for 25 minutes. Everything soluble walked out into that water. The starches, the potassium, the simple sugars. That cloudy water is the entire reason you boiled them. Pouring it down the sink is like brewing a pot of coffee, throwing out the coffee, and eating the grounds. Let it cool and make it the base of your bucket. Second, where your microbes come from. The recipe says finished compost, which is fine, but you can do better, and it costs nothing. Walk to the oldest tree you have access to. Under the leaf litter, where it is dark and damp, there is a layer that is not quite leaf and not quite soil. It crumbles in your hand. It smells sweet, like a forest after rain. Sometimes you can see white threads running through it. That is leaf mold, and it is the best free inoculant on your property. Take 2 good handfuls and fill the hole back in. Here is why it beats a bag off a shelf. Those organisms already survived your winter and your summer. They are living in your rainfall, your soil chemistry, your part of the country. A bag from the store is somebody else's neighborhood. Third, the sugar. Brown sugar works. It feeds bacteria, and they multiply fast on it, and I am not going to pretend otherwise. But Cho's original does not call for it. It calls for a pinch of coarse sea salt, for trace minerals, at a very low dose. And sugar comes with a string attached. If you put sugar in this bucket, it goes on the soil only. Never on the leaves of anything you plan to eat. Skip the sugar, use sea salt, and you have more freedom later. Fourth, and this is the one that has people setting an alarm for 2 in the morning. The recipe says stir it every couple of hours for 24 to 48 hours. Please do not. It is impractical and it gives you a worse brew. Stirring every 2 hours does not make it aerobic. It punches air into something that spends the other 110 minutes going anaerobic. You get neither one cleanly. Pick a lane. Lane 1 is the lazy lane and the one I use. Lid on loose, set it in the shade, do not touch it. That is the Jadam way, and that is the entire point of Jadam. Lane 2, a $12 aquarium air pump, stone in the bucket, running continuously. Now you have a genuinely aerobic brew. Both work. The middle does not, and now the part that changes everything. Stop watching the clock. 24 hours is not a biological fact. It is a guess made in somebody's warm garage. Microbes run on temperature. Around 85 degrees, expect 36 to 48 hours. Around 70, give it 3 days. Around 60, 5 days or more. In a cold snap, it may simply not go, so watch the surface instead. When the bucket is ready, a thin white film forms across the top, not fuzzy, not colored. A pale, slightly wrinkled skin, like the film on cooling milk. That film is your first free test, and the moment you stop guessing. If 4 days pass with no film, your leaf mold was too dry or your spot too cold. Move it somewhere warmer and give it 2 more days. So, making it. 2 handfuls of leaf mold. 2 medium potatoes boiled soft and mashed with their cooking water. A pinch of coarse sea salt. Clean water to 4 inches below the rim, because that headspace matters. The bucket makes gas. Lid on loose. Shade. Wait for the film. Then strain through an old pillowcase or a paint strainer bag, and do not throw out what stays behind. Dig that in around a shrub. It is still full of life. Dilute 1 part brew to 10 parts water. And here is the number nobody gives you. About 2 cups of the diluted mix per established vegetable plant, or half a gallon around the base of a shrub once every 2 to 3 weeks. Before bucket 2, I want to hand you something. Everything in this video, all 5 recipes, the exact amounts, the temperature chart, the 3 tests, and every source I am citing is written up in a free blueprint you can keep. I put it together because I know how this goes. You are watching on a phone in the kitchen, and by Saturday when you are standing over an actual bucket, half of it is gone. So the blueprint holds what I cannot fit in here. The full dosing chart by plant type. The dilution for seedlings versus mature shrubs, which are not the same number. A month-by-month calendar. And the extension publications listed by number so you can read them yourself. It is free. There is nothing to sign up for. And it will still be there in August when your tomatoes are actually asking for it. Scan the code on the screen, or the link is at the top of the description. Print it, put it on the garage shelf, get it dirty. That is what it is for. All right, bucket 2. Bucket 2 is the feeding bucket, and this is where I am going to make you a little annoyed at every video you have watched about this. The standard recipe says 2 pounds of fresh plant material, weeds or herbs, plus 4 pounds of fresh manure, 10 liters of water, sit 2 weeks, strain, dilute 10 to 1, weeds or herbs. That is like a bread recipe that says add some flour or something. The plant you choose is not a detail. It is the entire bucket. Let me show you with numbers. In 1954, a man named Lawrence Hills rented 3/4 of an acre of ground in the village of Bocking, in Essex, England. He was interested in one plant. Comfrey. Over 8 years, he collected comfrey strains from growers all over Britain, including some from the old planting ground of Henry Doubleday himself, and grew them side by side and measured them. 21 distinct strains. Bocking 1, Bocking 2, all the way up. Number 14 was the one. In his 5-year yield trials, Bocking 14 came second for sheer tonnage, about 33 tons per acre. But when they ran the mineral analysis, it came back with the highest potash of the lot, 7.09%. An autumn cut plant analyzed at 2.77% calcium, 0.75% phosphoric acid, 7.09% potash, and 0.144% iron. Run that out and you have something in the neighborhood of a 3-1-6 fertilizer. That is a number you would pay for on a bag. And here is what matters for your yard. Bocking 14 sets almost no viable seed. It stays exactly where you put it. Common comfrey will take over and you will be digging it out for a decade. 2 more worth naming. Stinging nettle, free along half the fence lines in this country, brings nitrogen and iron. Half comfrey and half nettle by weight gives you a bucket close to balanced. And alfalfa, which we get to next, because there is something hiding in it. Now the manure, and this part is serious, so stay with me. That recipe calls for 4 pounds of fresh manure. And then, catch this, halfway through the same video says, fresh manure is not suitable for immediate use and needs at least 7 days. It never resolves that, so you are left holding a bag of manure with no idea whether to age it first or whether 2 weeks in the bucket counts. It does not. Aging manure means composting it properly with real heat before it comes near your bucket. 7 days in a pile is not composting. That is just a pile. And then there is the thing that video never mentions at all. The thing that can take your garden away from you for 3 years. Oregon State University Extension published on this because they kept getting the same phone call. Gardeners bringing in horse or livestock manure, spreading it, then watching their vegetables come up with twisted, cupped, curling leaves. Poor germination. Young plants dying. Misshapen fruit. The cause is a group of herbicides, picloram, clopyralid, and aminopyralid, sprayed on pasture and hay to kill broadleaf weeds and leave the grass standing. The animal eats the hay. The chemical passes straight through and comes out in the manure still active. The University of Wisconsin put it plainly. Most herbicides break down during composting. These do not. Ohio State found sensitive crops can be damaged at 10 parts per billion, and tomatoes are among the most sensitive things you can grow. There was a hayfield in North Carolina treated in June of 2006. The residue was still high enough to damage tomatoes 3 years later. I am not telling you to stop using manure. Manure is one of the best things that ever happened to a garden. I am telling you to test it first, and the test is free. Take 3 cups and fill each half with clean potting soil and half with the manure you are thinking of using, mixed together. Fill 3 more with clean potting soil alone. Plant a pea or a bean seed in every cup. Water them, put them on a windowsill. 2 to 3 weeks later, look at the leaves. If the manure cups are cupping, curling, twisting, and growing narrow and strange while the clean cups look normal, that manure does not go in your garden. Not this year, not next year. That test costs you a packet of seeds in 3 weeks. The alternative costs you 3 seasons. So, building bucket 2, 2 pounds of chopped comfrey and nettle, aged, composted manure, or skip it and go all plant, which is what I do. Water to 4 inches below the rim, lid on loose, and in the shade. I flag that because the recipe I have been following says put this one in a warm, sunny spot, while the same channel's other recipe says shade. A dark plastic bucket in full July sun runs past 120 degrees. That cooks your nitrogen off as ammonia and kills the population you are trying to grow. Shade. Every time. 2 weeks. It will smell, and that is normal for this one. It is a plant ferment, not a perfume. Strain. Dilute 1 to 10. 2 cups per fruiting plant every 2 weeks once flowers appear. And brew what you need. Do not seal a live ferment in a jar in the garage for 3 months. It builds pressure, and the population in there at month 3 is not the one you made. Bucket 3 is the spray, and I want to handle this one gently, because a lot of you have made it, and I am not here to make anybody feel foolish. The recipe going around is tomato paste. 2 tablespoons, or 4 depending on which sentence of the video you are watching, which is its own problem. Stirred into a liter of water, poured into 10 more liters, sprayed on your tomato leaves and blossoms once a week. The habit is good, and I mean that. Getting out there every Saturday with a sprayer, looking closely at your plants for 10 minutes, will make you a better grower all by itself. So we keep the sprayer, we keep Saturday, we change what goes in the tank. Here is why, and it is just arithmetic. 2 tablespoons of tomato paste is about 32 grams. In 11 liters of water, that is roughly 0.3%. The reference work on this is Foliar Fertilization, Scientific Principles and Field Practices by Victoria, Fernandez, Thomas Soteropoulos, and Patrick Brown, published in 2013. It is the standard text. What it says is this: micronutrients sprayed on leaves are typically applied at around 1%. Macronutrients, your nitrogen and phosphorus and potassium, generally need 5 to 10% of the water volume to do anything at all. 0.3% is not close. It is not a weaker version of the right thing. It is below the line where anything happens. And if you fix that by adding more paste, you would need about half a kilo in 11 liters. Your leaves would be sticky and red, and they would scorch in the first hour of sun. One more line worth correcting, because it is the whole justification. It says that if you only water the roots, the plant has to work harder to move nutrients up to the leaves. It does not. Water and dissolved minerals move up the xylem, pulled along by water evaporating out of the leaves. The sun does that work. The plant is not straining. So what goes in the tank instead? This is my favorite story in the whole video. In 1975, a researcher at Michigan State University named Stanley Rise published something odd. He had been laying coarsely chopped alfalfa hay in bands beside crop rows. Lettuce, rice, cucumbers, tomatoes, cauliflower, field corn, and the plants grew better, noticeably better. And in his own report, he admitted he could not explain it. He wrote that the size of the response suggested nitrogen from the alfalfa was not the likely cause. Something else was going on, and he did not know what. It took him 2 more years to find it. In March of 1977, in the journal Science, volume 195, pages 1339 to 1341, Rees and his colleagues published the answer. They had pulled a crystalline substance out of alfalfa meal. Sprayed on rice foliage or fed into the nutrient solution, it increased the plant's dry weight and their water uptake. Mass spectrometry identified it, triacontanol. Sprays containing it also increased growth in corn, in barley, and in tomatoes grown in soil. It is active at concentrations as low as 10 micrograms per liter. 10 micrograms. And now the honest part, which is why you are watching this channel and not another one. In 1983, Rise himself, writing with Robert Hautz, acknowledged that since the 1977 discovery, several researchers had failed to reproduce the effect. That is real, and I am not going to hide it from you. Triacontanol has been argued over for 40 years. But here is where I land, and you are welcome to disagree with me in the comments. A 40-pound sack of plain alfalfa pellets, the kind sold as rabbit feed, runs about $16 at a feed store. It is safe. It carries nitrogen and organic matter regardless, and the compound in question was pulled out of that exact plant and published in Science. That is a bet worth $16. That is not a bet worth 32 grams of tomato paste. So, the alfalfa spray. 2 cups of plain alfalfa pellets, and check the label, no added molasses and no medications, into 1 gallon of warm water. Let it sit 12 to 24 hours. It swells into a green sludge and it smells like a barn. Strain it hard, through cloth, twice. Anything solid will clog your sprayer and sit on the leaves. Then dilute that liquid 1 part to 4 parts water for the tank, and spray it right, because timing is most of it. Early morning, or the last hour of daylight. Never the middle of the day. Midday sun on wet leaves burns them, and the spray dries before the leaf can take anything in. Get the undersides of the leaves. That is where the openings are. Wet and glistening, not dripping off. Once a week from first flower until the fruit starts sizing up. And here is your 3rd free test. Before you spray a whole plant, spray 3 leaves. Just 3. Come back in 48 hours and compare them to the leaves beside them. Any spotting, any yellow edges, any curling, cut your strength in half and try again. That one is not my idea, honestly. The tomato paste video said to test a small area first. It is the best line in it, and it deserved more than the 3 seconds it got. One greenhouse rule while we are here. Do not carry processed tomato products or tobacco products into your tomato bed. Coulson and colleagues, publishing in PLOS 1, found the RNA of a plant virus in 12 of 21 pepper and spice food products they tested. They inoculated tobacco plants with the positive samples, and every one developed the characteristic lesions. The virus survived commercial food processing and was still infectious. Tomatoes have their own close relatives of that virus, and they spread by simple contact. Hands, tools, plant debris. Commercial greenhouses ban those products on site for exactly this reason. Wash your hands, keep the pantry out of the tomato patch, and let's keep going. Bucket 4. Watermelon rind, and I am going to give this one a different job than the one it usually gets. The recipe says blend the rind with warm water, dilute it, let it sit 2 days, and water your plants once or twice a month. 2 things about that are smart, and 1 thing will bring every wasp in the county into your yard. The smart part's first. Blending is right. You are opening up all that surface area instead of waiting months for a chunk of rind to break down. And there is a line at the end, thrown away almost as an afterthought, that says add a liter of compost tea if you have it. That afterthought is the most valuable sentence in the whole recipe. The rind is food. The compost tea is the life. Without the second one, you are pouring sugar water on your garden. So what is actually in a watermelon rind? About 92% water. There is potassium and there is organic matter, and I will say this in its favor. It delivers meaningfully more actual potassium than the tomato paste spray does. Several times more. That is a low bar, but credit where credit is due. What it is not is a fertilizer that will carry a crop. And the problem is the blended sugary slurry sitting open for 48 hours in July. You are running an open-air fruit fly operation. Wasps find it. It goes alcoholic. On a hot day, it turns sharp enough that I would not want it near tender roots. So here are two better jobs. Job 1. Pour the blended rind straight into bucket 2 as free sugar. It replaces the brown sugar, it costs nothing, and it goes into a bucket that is designed to ferment and is already covered and in the shade. Job 2. Bury it. Dig a shallow trench between your plants, 4 inches down, pour the slurry in, cover it, mulch on top. In the hottest stretch of summer, that is a slow moisture release right where the roots are, and the worms will find it inside a week. And one thing nobody warns you about: the seeds. If you blend the rind with the seeds still in it and pour that across your beds, next spring you will have watermelon seedlings coming up in your lettuce, your carrots, and your walkway. Take the seeds out. Ask me how I know. Bucket 5. Stay with me for 90 seconds, because this one has more real field research behind it than everything else in this video put together, and almost nobody in American gardening will say it out loud. It is completely free. You already produce it every day. I am talking about diluted human urine. Now, before anybody reaches for the back button, let me give you the institutions, because this is not a fringe idea and it is not a joke. In Brattleboro, Vermont, there is a non-profit research organization called the Rich Earth Institute, co-founded by a man named Abe Nohays. They have been running field trials on this for over a decade in partnership with the University of Michigan, where the work is led by Professor Nancy Love and Professor Krista Wigginton in Civil and Environmental Engineering. That is a research university and a funded institute with federal grant support, not a blog. Here are numbers from one of their field seasons. They collected about 4,500 gallons for use as fertilizer on hay. 1,700 of those gallons were sanitized and applied to test plots on 2 farms. The treatments were pure, sanitized urine diluted 50-50 with water, and synthetic fertilizer, all applied at the same rate of 50 pounds of nitrogen per acre against a no-fertilizer control. Both the diluted and the undiluted increased yield in the second cut of hay. The 50-50 dilution came out about 16% ahead of undiluted, and the Institute's own summary of these trials is that hay fertilized with urine produced yields on par with hay fertilized using synthetic fertilizer. On par with the bag you pay for, and it is fast. The nitrogen in it is in a form roots take up almost immediately. You will see the color change in 7 to 10 days. Nothing else in this video moves that quickly. Now the rules, and these are not optional. This is the part every other video leaves out. 1. Diluted. 1 part to 10 parts water for established plants, 1 to 20 for anything young. Undiluted on a garden bed is a salt problem waiting to happen. 2. Soil only. Never on leaves, never on anything you are going to eat raw. 3. Damp soil first. The same research group found that applying in dry conditions caused greater loss of nitrogen to the air. Water the bed, then pour, then a little water on top to carry it down. 4. Do not spray it or broadcast it. That same work found broadcasting increased nitrogen loss. Pour it at the base, low and slow. 5. On any food crop, stop a month before you harvest. That is the conservative home garden version of a standard waiting period, and it costs you nothing to follow. 6. Fresh only, within a day. Stored, it turns to ammonia, and it will announce itself to your whole street. And 7, which matters. If you are on medication you would rather not think about, skip the vegetable beds entirely and put this on ornamentals. Roses, hydrangeas, lilacs, the lawn, shrubs and trees. There is no food safety question there at all, and those plants will take it gratefully. Where do I actually use it? The compost pile first, because it is the fastest way I know to fix a pile that will not heat up. Then the lawn, the ornamental shrubs, and sweet corn. And here is the honest limit, because you deserve it. This is high in nitrogen and comparatively low in potassium. So it is a leaf and stem feed, not a flower and fruit feed. That is exactly what bucket 2, the comfrey bucket, is for. The two of them together cover the whole plant. Neither one does it alone. I know precisely what the comment section is about to look like. So let me ask instead, did your grandparents do this? Because a great many American farm families did, and quietly, and I would like to hear those stories. All right, 5 buckets. Now the 4 small things that decide whether any of them work. Number 1, your water and a fix that costs about $10. Every one of these recipes says use rainwater, or let tap water sit out for 24 hours so the chlorine escapes. Half of that is true. Free chlorine does gas off overnight. But a lot of American water systems no longer use free chlorine. They use chloramine. And chloramine does not evaporate when you leave water sitting out. That is precisely why utilities switch to it. It lasts. Your bucket sat out all night and accomplished nothing. First, find out which one you have. Every public water system in this country has to publish an annual consumer confidence report. Search your town's name and consumer confidence report, and it is in there in plain language. If it says chloramine, here is the fix. Plain vitamin C powder. Ascorbic acid. The American Water Works Association added ascorbic acid to its standard for dechlorinating water mains, and utilities including San Francisco's use it before discharging treated water into the environment. The reference dose in the Forest Service guidance is about 1 gram per milligram per liter of chlorine per 100 gallons. For a 5-gallon bucket, that is a pinch. A 1/4 teaspoon, stir, wait 5 minutes, go. And do not go the other direction and panic about chlorine in your beds. One study found you would need about 65 parts per million to sterilize the top 6 inches of soil, more than 10 times any drinking water. Tap water kills some surface microbes and the population rebounds quickly. It is your brewing bucket that cares, not your garden bed. Number 2, your nose and 4 hours. Every one of these brews has a window, and you can find it without any equipment at all. Smell it. Sour, like sourdough starter, like a barn, sharp but clean. That is a working ferment. Use it. Rotten eggs, sewage, a sulfur smell that turns your head away. That batch is finished. Pour it into your compost pile, rinse the bucket, start over. Do not put that on a plant. And once you strain a brew, use it within about 4 hours. What is alive in that liquid at hour 4 is not what is alive in it the next morning. Number 3, how much? Because not one of those videos ever tells you. Seedlings and anything transplanted in the last 2 weeks. Half strength, 1 cup, and only after the soil is already damp. Established vegetables. 2 cups of the diluted mix per plant, every 2 to 3 weeks. Shrubs, roses, and berry canes. Half a gallon at the base. Trees. 2 gallons out at the drip line, 3 or 4 times a season, and never on dry soil. Water first, feed second. Feeding a thirsty root is how you burn it. Number 4, 3 rules borrowed straight from commercial greenhouses. If there is sugar or manure in the bucket, that bucket goes on the soil only, never on anything you are going to eat. Cornell's guidance is direct. Teas made with additives like molasses or yeast follow the same waiting periods as raw manure. And there is a reason. Research published in Compost, Science, and Utilization found that adding molasses encouraged regrowth of Salmonella and E. coli 0157H7, and the more molasses, the more regrowth. Second, we covered. Keep processed tomato and tobacco products out of the tomato bed. Third, and it is free. Wash your hands between beds. And one more that is just common sense. Use a clean bucket, not the one that had deck stain in it. A new 5-gallon bucket is about $5, and it will outlive both of us. Now the part I care about most. I have handed you 5 recipes. So has everybody else. The difference is I am not walking away and leaving you to guess whether any of it did anything. Leave a control row. When you start feeding, pick 3 plants and do not feed them. Same bed, same sun, same water. Put a stake beside them. Take a photo on day 0 and another on day 21 from the same spot, standing the same way. That is the whole experiment, and it will teach you more about your own garden than 100 videos will, this one included. Some of you will find that one of these 5 did nothing in your soil and another did a great deal. That is not a failure. That is you learning your own ground. And then there is the test I like best, because it is ridiculous and it works. The USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service runs something called Soil Your Undies. You take a pair of 100% cotton underwear. Cotton, not a blend, because a blend will not break down. Bury it about 5 inches deep and mark the spot. Come back in 60 days and dig it up. If you pull out a mostly intact pair of underwear, your soil biology is asleep. If you pull out a waistband and a few threads, your soil is fully alive, and everything you poured on it has been busy. It is the only soil test I know that will make your neighbor walk over and ask what on earth you are doing. So here is your season. Early spring, as the ground warms, bucket 1 goes on the beds. Once things are up and growing, bucket 2, the comfrey and nettle feed, every 2 weeks. From first flower through fruit set, bucket 3, the alfalfa spray, Saturday mornings. All summer, bucket 4, watermelon rind, into bucket 2 or into a trench. And bucket 5 wherever you need, fast green growth, on the compost pile and the ornamentals, following those 7 rules. And now the argument I actually want to have with you. Mulch. Specifically, piling wood chips deep around your shrubs and beds. I know a lot of you were taught that is asking for trouble. Chips steal nitrogen, chips harbor disease. Chips are messy, and they do not belong in a tidy yard. So let me put 2 people in front of you and then get out of the way. Dr. Linda Chalker-Scott is the Extension Urban Horticulturist at Washington State University's Puyallup Research and Extension Center. Her fact sheet, FS160E, using arborist wood chips as landscape mulch, says that where trees are a dominant feature of a landscape, arborist wood chips are one of the best mulch choices for trees. She has published separate pieces taking apart both of those fears by name, and the buried inoculum research indicates pathogens survive poorly in fresh wood chips and yard waste. And in Sequim, Washington, a man named Paul Gotchi has grown a garden and an orchard under deep wood chips for decades, entirely by hand and by instinct, and started an argument in every corner of the gardening world doing it. One of them measured it. One of them lived it. They live in the same state. I mulch deep, and I have not gone back. But I know a lot of you were taught by people who knew exactly what they were doing, and were taught the opposite. So tell me in the comments, deep mulch around your shrubs or clean bare soil? And what happened when you tried it? And one more, quickly. Go look up your consumer confidence report and tell me whether your town runs chlorine or chloramine. I am curious what that map looks like across everybody watching. Go boil some potatoes. And keep the water this time. Thanks for spending this time in the garden. I will see you in the next one.